Dedicated to geeks and nerds, you're listening to Project I Radio, 24/7 Nerdgasm.
Bizzong.
Bizzong. Bizzong.
Bizzong. Bizzong. Bizzong.
Bizzong. Bizzong. Bizzong. Bizzong. Bizzong. Bizzong.
This is Bizzong, the Bizarre Weird Fiction Podcast. With me, your host, Mr. Frank Zongers. So glad to see you back. As always, we're here to do it once again this week. We just keep on chugging along. And this week, Zongers, we got a different kind of guest for you. We got one of them guests that I have to qualify a bit, but I'm sure by the end of this, it'll all make sense why we have our guest on this week. I'm talking about the name that you're not going to know, one Mr. Chuck Buda. Although, if you listen to Project iRadio enough, you'll know the name Chuck Buda because he advertises his books on like the horror show with Brian Keene, and he's on different shows. And I had a chance to meet Chuck first down at the Scares of Care convention in Williamsburg, Virginia. But as it turns out, Chuck's actually from my neck of the woods up here in New Jersey, and we've since started promoting and working together, as you'll hear in the interview. But what's really important about Chuck and why we have him on the podcast is because Chuck was one of the first people when I started Bizzong that came to me and said, you know, Mr. Frank, I discovered the podcast, and now I'm just falling down this wormhole of Bizarro, and every time you do an interview, I'm buying bizarre books by that author, and I love this stuff, and I'm really excited to learn more about it and hear about it and even try my hand at writing it. So, as you're going to hear in the interview, this is like testimony. He's going to testify, Mr. Chuck Buda is, about the power of Bizzong, his love for Bizarro, and we're going to talk a bit about the work Chuck and I are going to be doing together. We're actually doing a book signing at a local brewery. That's so hard for me to get out that word. We're doing a signing at a brewery in New Jersey here. And if you're in the area, I'd love for you to come out on November 11th and check that out. So listen to this interview for all that information as well. Zongers, without any further ado, I present to ye Chuck Buda. I give us the gong. I'd like to welcome to Bizzong this week a very unconventional guest. I like when I have unconventional guests on because this week I have the one and only Mr. Chuck Buda on Bizzong this week. And you might be saying to yourself, Mr. Frank, who the hell is Chuck Buda? I assure you, by the time we're done tonight, Zongers, you're going to know very intimately who Mr. Chuck Buda is. So, without all my further ramblings, I'd like to welcome to Bizzong this week Mr. Chuck Buda. Chuck, welcome to Bizzong.
Thank you, Mr. Frank. I'm so excited. I can't believe I'm on your show.
Chuck, do you know why you're on Bizzong?
I have no idea.
And
I don't really care as long as I get to spend time with you.
Oh, that's so sweet of you. Well, let me explain to all the other Zongers why you're here tonight. There's a great many reasons why you're here tonight, but we're gonna qualify you to be on Bizzong this week, and then we'll explain further why we have you here.
Okay.
You're here first and foremost to give testimony, to testify. Chuck Buda, you are here to testify to Bizzong because you are one of the first Zongers to come back to me and say, I started listening to the podcast, and now fucking motherfucker, I am doing nothing but buying Bizarro books. So you, Mr. Chuck Buda, are a convert directly as a result of Bizzong. Is that not true?
Sir, that is definitely true, sir.
I love it. Can you explain?
I feel like I am testifying on the Hill.
You have to testify. Testify, Chuck Buda. Testify. Tell us why you tuned into Bizzong and what made you open up that first book. And go ahead and tell us what that first book was.
All right. Well, I love the Project iRadio podcast shows. And, you know, I started out, I'm a horror freak, I guess, by nature. So listening to Armcast and Arm and Tooth and Brian Keene, the horror show with Brian Keene, really got me into Project I Radio. And then when Bizzong came out, I said, wow, Bizzong, that's such like a bizarre name. I got to check it out. And I listened to it. And first of all, I love the intro, and I spend many mornings using that as my alarm clock to get out of bed. So I love the Bizzong. I think it should be everybody's theme song. And your interviews are great. I mean, you basically opened up my eyes, again, being a horror fan my whole life, to this other side of the aisle. And I guess I've read authors that have kind of been considered, having a foot on both sides of horror and bizarro, people like Edward Lee and Jeff O'Brien and stuff. And when I started listening to your show, it really opened my eyes to the other writers that were out there. I had no idea that there was an actual bizarro community or genre. And I think one of the first podcasts that I really fell in love with was the Kevin Strange show. So, I started reading Kevin Strange, and it really took me by surprise, the over-the-top gore and sexuality and really bizarre settings that were used to tell very similar humanistic type stories. So it was good stuff.
That's fantastic. Now, and thank you for that, and thank you for converting, and thank you for checking out the podcast. That is what we are here for, Chuck. I often say to people that we get messages from people saying they started listening, they check it out, they're listening to Brian Keene, they're listening to Armand, wherever they're coming from, and they're seeing this Bizzong thing, and they listen to Bizzong, and they discover there's another world here. There's another world, and so often with Bizarro, it's horror-based, frequently, not anymore. It comes from all different directions, but I think it's easily accessible for those who are into horror because, like you said, Edward Lee, they talk about splatterpunk and Edward Lee. Of course, that's a natural transition to Bizarro. I always talk about Joe Lansdale and the Drive-In, book one, but the whole trilogy is like it was Bizarro before anybody was calling it Bizarro. And that's like, it's a natural corridor to use horror to introduce yourself to Bizarro. Now, you might have been talking before and telling everybody why you were testifying, Chuck Buda, and telling everybody what your love is. And I bet there's some people going, I recognize that voice. Why do I recognize that voice? Chuck Buda. You're here because you are a fan of Bizarro. You've been converted by Bizzong, but you are also a co-host of one of Project iRadio's newest podcasts, and that would be the Mondo Method podcast. Is that not correct?
Oh yeah, I forgot about that.
No, you didn't.
Yeah, no, it's the show is a lot of fun, and of course I'm with my mentor and the guy that I look up to in horror writing, which is Armand Rosamilia. So it's a great opportunity to really talk about writing from a writer standpoint, but not only an experienced writer, but a neophyte writer like myself. So I think the listeners get a chance to get into the mind of a writer from both sides, somebody who's very experienced and somebody who's newer to the publishing world. So it's a lot of fun, and you get a chance to hear me make lots of mistakes publicly and blatantly, and it's forever out there on the internet. So,
Chuck, I love the Mondo Method podcast on Project I Radio, and I'm not just saying that because of one of your network cohorts, but I truly do enjoy the show because it is capturing you specifically at a unique point in your career. You're the young gun, as they say, the newcomer, the great Buda, as the introduction goes. And it is a very unique a thing. Like I don't have, it's so funny. I write as well, and I talk about that on the podcast, but you have so many more releases than I do so far in such a short span of time. Compared to me, I've been going at this for 2 years or so, and we've taken different paths. So you're like this Johnny come lately who's like come out. I always tell you, like beast mode. Chuck Buda is in beast mode. He's just releasing shit left and right like crazy. So it is, but I do know like you're kind of new to the writing stuff, and it is extremely entertaining and interesting to listen to your perspectives, and anybody who's come up writing in the indie scene. Like, this is a great opportunity to tune into Mondo Method and listen to this guy, because we've all been there. We've all done those crazy things, thinking they're great ideas, and oftentimes they are. And you listen to Chuck and what he's doing, and you're hearing him. He's, like he said, he knows he's making mistakes and he's learning them, and he's, journaling it on the podcast as it goes. It's a great podcast. It's a great opportunity to hear your whole career kind of unfold in front of you. And you're using Armand Rosamilia, past guest on Bizzong, another unconventional guy who I've brought onto the podcast because for the exact reason you're doing Mondo Method. Like, you guys, Armand he's a machine as far as marketing and branding himself. And he's still an indie guy, but he's been through the grinder. He knows the ropes. It's not necessarily Bizarro. And I'm sure you already have realized that the Bizarro approach oftentimes is very different from the horror approach. Have you noticed any of that yet?
Oh, yeah. Well, first of all, when I fell in love with Bizarro, and I guess I should take a step back, I really appreciate your feedback on the Mondo Method, and I actually look forward to your comments. You're very engaged with our Facebook page and leaving us questions and comments and stuff, which is great, because I think the more interactive that folks are with us, the better we can address, the concerns that are out there with other writers. The more that we do the show, we seem to find that a lot of folks in the writing community have the same questions or problems that we do. So it's funny to see that, we sit here day in and day out writing it, and you think that you're a man on an island with problems that only affect you. And then you get on the radio and talk with all these people and find out that there's so many people in the same spot that you are. But now jumping forward to your question, I got into the Bizarro and, through you, and you opened up my eyes, and I said, wow, this is great. And I started reading Kevin Strange and C.B. Hunt and some other people, Danger Slater. And I was like, I got to do this. And I came up with all these ideas. And so I kind of changed my beast mode, and I said, okay, I'm going to write horror, but I'm also going to write Bizarro, and I'm going to start to do, like every other release will be a different genre. And I actually had the opportunity to jump into a Kevin Strange class that he runs through Google Hangouts from his house, and it was an awesome class. And man, the guy is fired up when it comes to Bizarro. He gets on there with video, and he's like in the camera's face, and he's like, this is what Bizarro is, and you got to do this with the settings and with the characters. And man, it was an awesome, intensive class, and our assignment was to write a Bizarro story. Well, it kicked my ass. So I wrote the story, I think 3 or 4 times. I submitted it to him. I'm still waiting for feedback. I think he may have burned it, because I think it was probably the worst thing I've ever written. And not to say anything about my writing or Kevin's teaching style, it's just Bizarro is a genre that has earned my respect, because you think that it's so easy to extrapolate, a human type story, whether it's got a horror bent to it or an erotica bent or whatever, and to put that into a Bizarro type production. And it doesn't seem like it's that much of a stretch, but it really pushes your mind to do things and think about the characters and the story that you ordinarily wouldn't do. So, and it just so happened at the time that I was taking his class, I was actually reading his Texas Chainsaw Mantis book. And so I was trying to, glom what he had done in that book, which was awesome, and put it, the same feel into my story. And, I'm afraid I just didn't capture it, so I'm looking forward to getting his feedback, and I have a feeling I'm going to have a lot of work to do to straighten out that story. But my God, major props to the authors that are out there, who write every day in the Bizarro genre, because it's a fascinating way of telling stories, but it is not easy at all.
Oh, Chuck Buda, I love you because you really echo my sentiments on the genre. I often have the same thing where like I read it and I am completely enamored with Bizarro, and I'm like, this is what I got to be writing. This is experimental. This is daring. This is where fiction is going. This is not the same old thing. And I dove into it, and I was guilty of those things like you often hear. I was writing weird things for the sake of being weird, which is, you'll have those people that decry, like, oh, don't say you're writing things for the sake of being weird. But there is a point where it's just, you're just being weird. You're just trying too hard is what they say when, you don't be weird for the sake of being weird. Of course you're being weird for the sake of being weird, but when you try too hard at doing that, you're no longer telling a story. You're just trying to be weird and forgetting that you're telling a story. I think that's where the sentiment "don't write to be weird for the sake of being weird" comes from. And I suffered from that too. I took a stab at early Bizarro with Strange House. It opened up when Kevin Strange himself was still running the press, and I submitted some stuff to him, and he accepted. It was like Lovecraftian weird Bizarro, and I just took a stab at it. And I was a young gun myself, like yourself, and I just wrote like, I don't know, there's a beast that comes down and shitting in the mouths, and I don't know, it was just crazy. And I enjoyed the story for what it was, but I was also noticing like a lot of Bizarro editors going, why does everybody write poop stuff? Like poop, it is not weird or bizarre in and of itself. Everybody poops. It's not weird. And, the story is accepted, and Kevin himself, to his credit, is like, you can write me poop stories all day. I'll take them. And there is a time and place for them, no matter what some people's opinions are. But yes, it is like an easy thing to go to, is like poop's weird, poop and brown and people playing in poop. That's weird. Yeah, it's weird, but Bizarre is more than that. So, I was guilty of being hack, as I say. And, I took a stab again with another short story in another Strange House book. And I went with, something different, but it still wound up being like a dick joke, really, is what it was. But I loved it. It was called Dick Sick, and it was a really fun story. I think it was better than going to poop. But after that, I really, I didn't want to be the dick and fart joke, but you have to really be saying something. And I was being hack about it, and that's my own assertion of my work. And when I wanted to expand further beyond that, I found like myself going, I don't know. Like I read this shit constantly, and I read really good Bizarro, like MP Johnson, who's writing about like, I don't know, cows and recluse abdominal muscles and stuff like that's real Bizarro stuff. I'm like, how do I get there? So what I did was I took, similar to you with Kevin Strange, I took Garrett Cook, who is also a big name in Bizarro. I took his workshop course about writing Bizarro, and he helped me tap into this sort of you tap into a dream logic when you write Bizarro, and you try to like twist reality, so to speak. And it's something you sort of have to train your brain to do if you're not necessarily accustomed to thinking that way. And taking his class led to a little flash fiction piece I wrote called Inflate. And it was basically about like this kind of swami guy that finds a blow-up doll on a beach and blows it up and gives this blow-up doll enlightenment and becomes conscious, and they walk off to nirvana together. It was... And
that's cool.
Yeah, it totally cool. Something I had to dig deep for, and something I don't know without getting that little tool, that little technique from Garrett that would have worked, but it helped me figure out that other thing, that little extra thing, that thing that you need to be not a dick and fart joke any longer, and tap into the real Bizarro. And while I still don't fully write Bizarro all the time, I have delved into it. I get like this, I get in a zone and I can feel it, and I got, oh, here's some good Bizarro stuff. And I tap into it, and I've wrote some shorter pieces that, haven't made the light of day yet, but I still hope to find the light of day. So that's where I go. I don't normally, my longer stuff that's out is not necessarily Bizarro. I write funny horror, really, is what it comes down to, but I always try to tap in to that Bizarro. So you should not feel discouraged taking a class. Like your first dip in the pool, as it were, with Kevin Strange's classes. He's very adept. He's very trauma-like, and very like weird Japanese horror type stuff. It's a good approach to take from him to tap into it. Now, what you wrote, do you think we'll see the light of day from his class?
Oh yeah, I mean, if he says anything, if he gives it the Mr. Frank 3-star treatment or better, then without a doubt, I will put it out there. I have a feeling it's going to be a rotten stinker. And I got my big boy pants on. I could take it.
Yeah.
I'm not one to say that everything that comes out of my mouth or my pen is, Hemingway, and it's far from it. But I would like to rework it and get it to a state that I would not embarrass myself putting it out there, because you mentioned like MP Johnson. I mean, I haven't read any of his stuff yet. I think I bought one or two of them. My Kindle's stacked full of, the authors, pretty much anybody you interview on the show. I've bought at least one book of each of those authors, and I'm just slow to get through my stuff. But I would not want to put something out there if I couldn't at least be, on some kind of remote level with some of these greats that you have on the show. And I'm not talking like an equal level, just somewhere in the vicinity neighborhood, because the folks that you interview on your show are just, going back to MP Johnson and Danger Slater. I mean, these are people that live it every day. And from that standpoint, I'm just a poser, but I would love to be a poser band in that world. It's really fun stuff to read,
Yeah, I agree with you. It is very tough to live and breathe it. And guys like you said, like MP, like Danger, even I had John Skip on, like the King of Kings, and they're doing it. It's what they do. And I think it's okay that you're not doing it all the time, but the fact that you read it, the fact that you appreciate it, and the fact that at times you feel in your soul that you want to replicate it, that's good enough. And it's good enough for the Bizarro community. And when you're doing it from the heart, and when you really do something bizarre, this has got it doesn't have to be pure Bizarro. It can have that edge, like you talked about CV Hunt. And when I interviewed her, it's like, you're not necessarily like true Bizarro. You got this, like, you got a Bizarro edge to you.
Right.
And, it's there. And when you write something like it, you'll know I got a Bizarro edge. And what I've found also is often the outsiders, the people that don't have really any inkling of what Bizarro is, just sort of look at you and go, oh, you're one of them Bizarro guys. I get it with Armand, and I've co-written books with him. And, he showed me stuff. He wrote the Hellmouth series with 3 other guys before I co-wrote with him. And he's like, oh, yeah, we're writing this Bizarro horror thing. Check it out. And I was like a beta reader for the first Hellmouth book. And I read it, and I'm like, well, this is fun stuff. It's fun stuff, and it's horror, and it's cool. But don't release this and tell the people that you're Bizarro, because they're not gonna have it in your head, but they're gonna see right through the fact that this is not really Bizarro per se. It's weird and it's edgy, but this is really just kind of like humorous horror, and it doesn't really quite cross the line into Bizarro yet. And then when I wrote the Shocker stuff with Armand, and we took it to the baby Jesus is there helping out the Shocker, and I love that. Yeah, he's fighting monsters and stuff, and it often gets confused because people don't know. Like, I get identified as a Bizarro guy, so like when the baby Jesus comes flying out of a toilet, they're like, oh, that's Bizarro. Like, baby Jesus flying out of a toilet is not necessarily Bizarro. Could be, but in this case, it's not. And really what Armand and I wrote is just like a weird, fun horror type of story, and like, it's cool. It's like Joe Lansdale, he rides that line of like, it's kind of weird, but we don't even get that as weird as Lansdale. But
I think that's the hardest part, though, is just defining the Bizzong, and the bizarre. Kind of like what you said, there's that edge, and there's a lot of stuff that straddles the line, and even the attendees in Kevin's class, the first thing he asked everybody on day 1 was define Bizarro for you.
Yeah.
And everybody had a completely different definition, and it's not that any of us were wrong, or that any of us were right. It's sort of in the eye of the beholder. But I agree with you in your stance that, that there is almost a defined line. It may be blurred and hazy, but there's definitely, a line that circles the Bizarro, true Bizarro, from that straddles the line.
Here's how I try to explain that Shocker is not Bizarro. All right, people will think, because they're not exposed to Bizarro, the lay person, shall we say, will think that, well, the baby Jesus came out of a toilet and helped the Shocker out fighting monsters. That's Bizarro. No, that's humorous horror. If it were Bizarro, the Shocker would be imprisoned in a bagel with cream cheese. That would be his prison cell, because the Shocker's in prison. So in the Shocker series, Shocker's just in Rawway Prison in New Jersey, a real place. If it were a Bizarro book, the Shocker would be imprisoned in a bagel with cream cheese because he upset some Jewish bagel shop owner, like something like that. Like, really, that's the uptick you need to make Shocker Bizarro. And then it would have to be about what it takes for Shocker to break free of a prison made of a bagel with cream cheese, because then you would toast it and melt the cream cheese. That's the type of stuff you have to explore with Bizarro, and that's where Shocker is not Bizarro. It's got weird things, and it's weirder than a lot of people who read straight horror are used to, but it's still, that's where I'm saying it's still not Bizarro. And I consciously, because I'm working with Armand and he's not somebody who's coming out of Bizarro, like I'm trying to temper the weird. So the tempering of the weird for me was, the baby Jesus and the monsters that come out in those stories. So that was like, where that story started out as like Armand just wanted to write this story about a guy stuck in prison and telling his tales about being a badass. And I couldn't but help add some kind of element of a supernatural, weird, funny thing. And that's where you get the monsters coming out and the silly sex stories and the crazy baby Jesus stuff. That's where that's all birthed from. That's birthed from me trying to temper my Bizarro. And that's why we never really crossed that path. But it seems weird to more straight horror readers.
I love that series, and I hope you guys don't finish it anytime soon. I hope it goes on for like 20 novels, because I really love, I just love the whole premise, and yeah, the schlocky, it's like shock schlock horror. And I think it sort of has some trauma tenets to it. It's got like a little bit of everything. It's really a good amalgamation of so many different pieces of horror and pieces of Bizarro. It may not be a Bizarro work, but it's got, I think, some of the components of good Bizarro in there. So, because it stretches your mind. And for me, I think that's the neat thing about Bizarro. Neat. Listen to me. I sound like a 5-year-old in school. Neat. Geez, that's neat. No, the thing that I really like about Bizarro is the way that the stories force your mind to go to places that it ordinarily wouldn't. You spend all day riding your desk or your cube, working at a job, or, driving the kids to their activities and all kinds of things. And, life is it just drones on. And then you read a Bizarro story and it's almost like, a Beatles song or something, Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds. I mean, there's like kaleidoscopes of things going on, and, that there's characters that aren't really people, and they might be inanimate objects, but now they have feelings. And like you said, the setting, it's, you're not in a prison, you're in a bagel with cream cheese or something. Yeah. It's just, it takes you to places that, I think we know about when we're children. You run around in the yard and you look at the sky and it's this big, endless universe. And then as you get older, your vision just tunnels either straight at the screen or down at the road in traffic. And you lose sight of all those wonderful examples of places that you can escape to. And that's where Bizarro takes me. And I have you to thank for it, Mr. Frank. You opened my eyes.
And thank you so much for that assertion of the childhood imagination. It's so true, and especially, for me, that's the thing. I love that daring, that we don't think like that no more. Like you said, we got that tunnel vision, and why can't a bagel with cream cheese be a prison? Because when I had some G.I. Joes and Transformers and I needed to imprison them, and I found a bagel with cream cheese in the gutter with some ants and turds on it, something. I don't know. It just needed to be, and that was prison. And why can't that be real again when we're 30 and 40 and 50 years old? And why can't that be real from our adult perspective of, like, what does it take to get out of a bagel with cream cheese covered in ants and turds left on a sidewalk, And that's the twist we need. God, we can read John Grisham and all these popular Stephen King guys. We read them all day long and know what's going to happen, and they're fun and they're fantastic, but there's nothing as daring as Bizarro and what's going on and what we're writing here in Bizarro. And you got your little piece of Kevin, and don't give up on it. If he hasn't gotten back to you, first of all, he will, because he listens to this podcast, and Strange, get on a Buda story. All right. That's your first favor. And second of all, even if he doesn't get back to you, you try to like embrace the weird, and don't stop embracing the weird. You can write your horror stuff, and Chuck Buda, as we'll talk about, you got all the time in the world to write your horror stuff. And,
yeah,
but when you get that little idea, that little weird idea, don't let it go. Ride it into the sunset and put something weird out. Just be daring with it. And who cares? See, we'll talk about it, because we got to talk about the path you are taking. and being a professional writer and trying to make a career of yourself. And that doesn't necessarily go hand in hand with writing about cream cheese jail cells, because you are trying to sell books and make a living. But, every once in a while, just embrace that weird and try to put something out. Just a flash fiction story, a short story, something. That's your homework. You do homework on the on the Mondo method.
I get homework on multiple shows now. I don't know what to do.
Now this is your Bizzong homework. Embrace a strange idea and write something. Write 500 words, write 1,000 words, write 5,000 words. See where the story takes you, but don't stray from a strange idea.
Yeah, no, I'll definitely keep at it. And in defense of Kevin, I know that I follow him regularly on Facebook and Twitter, and I know that, he released a new book of shorts and he traveled out to visit Brian Keene. And he did warn us in the class that it would be, some time before he got the edits back to us. So I know it's coming. I just kidded when I said that he probably threw it out, because I just think it's definitely not up to the snuff that I would like, and I'm sure not up to, his ideal of what Bizarro is. But that's why I went to the master, to learn. So I came to the mountain, and I hope to come away enlightened.
Yeah, if you love Bizarro, don't let it go. Not saying like you got to live here, but don't let it go. Chuck Buda, before we further ourselves into this interview, this is a unique opportunity I have with you, because you are a Project iRadio co-host, right? Cohort. So
I am.
Normally, I get right into my advertising pieces at the beginning of the show, but since I have you here and we're cohorts, I figure this is a wonderful opportunity to talk about a wonderful advertiser we have here on Project iRadio. Chuck Buda, do you know who I'm talking about?
I have a feeling it's a place located in Jacksonville, Florida, and online.
Just off I-95 in Jacksonville, Florida. You're exactly right. So will you help me out with this ad this week on Bizzong?
Yeah, no doubt.
All right. You just follow my lead, all right, Chuck Buda?
Yep.
Okay. I want to take a second and talk about one of our sponsors and the quality of their products. Chuck Buda, do you know who that might be?
I believe that's subculturecorsets.com.
That's right, Chuck Buda. Subculture Corsets and Clothing. They have corsets, rockabilly, steampunk, gothic, pinup, and retro clothing. They have shoes and accessories as well. Subculture Corsets are the real thing, not that plastic stuff. Chuck, what's inside Subculture Corsets? Do you know?
Wonderful, wonderful stuff.
Yeah.
And lots of happiness.
Not plastic. They use good steel. Like, it's not going to lose its shape when you put the corsets on. You like corsets?
I think the masks would last through a Holocaust, too.
Oh, you like the masks over there?
Oh, I love all that stuff.
Chuck Buda, you yourself, you're above, like I say, you're ahead of the curve on me here. You actually own a piece of Subculture Corset clothing, do you not?
I have a few, yes.
You have the t-shirt. Is it awesome?
Oh, man, it's the softest thing. I actually wear it like 3 or 4 times a week while I'm writing. And there's kind of a joke around the house where my wife and kids yell at me to take off the shirt and get it washed once in a while. But it is so soft. And I find that I wiggle and I writhe in my chair and I write so much better wearing the t-shirt. So.
Oh, there it is. And that Zongers, that's just a t-shirt that Chuck Buda is talking about. Subculture Corsets. They've got everything. They've got the brands like Hell Bunny, Seven Deadly, Red Queen, Black Label, Bait Footwear, Voodoo, Bait Footwear. Doesn't that make you think? Voodoo Vixen, Punk Rave, Killstar, Restyle, and so many more. You can find Subculture Corsets online at subculturecorsets.com. And like we said, they're just off I-95 in Jacksonville, Florida. And if you put in the discount code, Chuck Buda, tell them what it is.
Bizzong.
Yes, if you put in the discount code,
Bizzong.
Bizzong, you get how much off, Chuck Buda?
10%.
10% off your entire order, not just one thing, your entire order. You know what that means? Buy more and save more, Chuck Buda. Isn't that correct?
Keeps more money in your pocket so you can have more fun with it.
That's right. So visit subculturecorsets.com or visit their store at the Avenues Mall in Jacksonville, Florida, and make sure you give them the code Bizzong to save 10% off your entire order. And don't forget, Chuck Buda endorses it with his t-shirt, amongst other things that he owns.
I do.
You do. Chuck Buda, let's carry on with our interview. Now, we haven't really delved into it, but we'll delve into it now. You are a writer. Do you consider yourself a writer? Let's ask you that question. Are you ready to consider yourself a writer?
I do. And it's funny because I really, I've been writing since I was 12, but I've only been publishing what I've written, I guess, a little over a year now, a year and a half. And, at this point I do, but I really didn't until I pressed publish on the first book. So that's where I'm at.
That's where you're at. And you're what you've put out so far is really just pure horror. Is that fair enough?
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely, slanted in the horror genre. It's kind of what I grew up with, either watching in movies or reading, and it's kind of my wheelhouse and what I like. So it's kind of hard to stray away from that.
Now, like I mentioned before, I myself have a couple of stories and a handful of anthologies. I have a short story collection of my own.
Scared Silly, I love it.
Scared Silly, and I'm about to unleash a new novella-length thing upon the world, November. But you, and of course the Shocker series. But you have like a million, 1,000,007 books out right now. How are you able to be so proliferate in such a short amount of time?
Well, I basically have no life, so I have no friends, and I sit alone all day. And well, you know what? It's funny. It comes from a couple of places, Mr. Frank. First of all, I lost my job 2 years ago to outsourcing overseas, and so my dream had always been to publish, to be a published author. And I sort of had a midlife crisis at the time that I lost my job. And I said, okay, I'm in my mid-40s and I really want to be a writer, and I've done nothing to advance that dream. So, it's do or die. I don't want to end up on my deathbed thinking back and saying I never went for it. At least if I tried for it and failed, I can look myself in the mirror and hold my head up high. So I sat down and I started writing, and basically, I don't have a full-time job right now, so I have nothing to do but to write. So I sit down and I write and come up with all these ideas, and I just keep cranking stuff out. And I think really the benefit to getting my stuff out quickly is just that I am very much an indie author. I don't have to submit my work to publishers and wait for them to give it the nod or send it back and say thanks but no thanks. So, it's on to the next. I finish something, I put it out there, let the chips fall where they may, and people like it, that's great. And if they don't, so be it. And I just move on to the next piece. So it's more a function of my schedule on a daily basis and my lack of, I guess, turnstiles to run through to get my work out there.
I have to admire that. I have to admire your work ethic. I have to admire your dedication to your craft now that you've embraced it. And I just got to admire the fact that you're taking the bull by the horns and not even really exploring, another publisher. You're self-publishing at this point. There's, for me, those are things I have personally struggled with from the get-go. When I started kind of being serious about getting things published, I was working a job that was thankless, and I was bored with it, and I hated it. And writing was an outlet for me. I was, one of them guys writing on the job. Screw you guys. I'm just going to write on the job and make my life a little more entertaining. And,
I should have done that for years.
Yeah. And then I started getting those little things published in short stories, anthologies, and they were getting accepted rather handily, much to, I was a little disillusioned in the long term. But there came a point where I let that job go. I walked off that job, and I sat there, and I was at that point where, like, what do I do now? Like, so I'm like, well, I'm doing the writing things. Like, I wrote 3 short stories, and they all got accepted. So I must be a brilliant writer, and I'm going to start writing. And I started writing something that, to this day, has not been picked up by a publisher yet. But I've often wrestled, and I, in my defense, I got a new full-time job and a better full-time job, and it pays the bills better than the job I walked off of. I was just stupid lucky within a month's time. So I never really had a chance to really explore the writing lifestyle like you have. But I've since, in those 3 weeks, I spit out a 50,000 word story that I'm still shopping around to this day and not having much luck. But I believe it's probably the best thing I wrote, or at least it deserves to be put in the hands of a publisher to be put in its best light. And since then, I've written something else that I am furiously trying to self-publish myself at the moment. So watching you come up out of nowhere and you're spitting out stories left and right, you have an incredible output on a daily basis. You have a daily writing goal of like 2,500 words. Is that not right?
Well, that's where I end up. My goal is actually 5,000 words a day. Jesus. And I was coming close to hitting that on a regular basis earlier this year, and I am nowhere near that now. Now I'm a lot closer to the 2,500 words a day. So yeah, I know some people look at that and say, well, that's a lot. But I was doing daily, 4,000, close to 5,000 a day. So for me, I feel like I'm losing.
Now, were you able, like, after you were out of the real world, out of your full-time job, and you decided you want to do this writing thing, were you able to, what was your output right out of the gate? Were you able to get big numbers like that on a daily basis?
Oh, no way. When I started, it was piecemeal, so I would write maybe 1,500 words, and maybe I'd get 2 days of 1,500 words, and then I'd go a week without writing, because I'd be mentally fried. And, the writing muscle is just like any other muscle. You have to exercise it. And I find now, I've lost the last couple of weekends because my son is actually working on an Eagle Scout project. And so we've taken the weekends to work on his project around town, and I got no writing done, 2 weekends in a row. And coming back on Monday to start again, it's like swallowing broken glass. I think I was lucky that I got out like 1,200 words on Monday, and then on Tuesday, I was back into like the 2,500 range. So, but it was a fight. I find when I'm writing consistently, 6-7 days a week, I can churn out 2,500 words, in 2 hours without really blinking. But that's an active exercising muscle. It's hard to keep that, with daily life. Things come up. Parents need to be taken to doctors, and kids have tournaments, and, there's all kinds of stuff that the car breaks down. So, getting a consistent schedule is extremely difficult.
Well, I admire your dedication to wanting to produce those 5,000 words a day, because you're still able to produce a pretty large amount of words a day. When I was between jobs, my goal was to write 1,000 words a day for 50 days and spit out a 50,000 word novella or novel. It rides the line, and it depends on how you want to define that. And what I wound up doing was it came out to like 60,000 words in 60 days, but I kept that pace. And 1,000 words a day I found was really not all that difficult. You and Armand have talked about pacing on the Mondo Method podcast right here on Project I Radio. And, that's what the Mondo method is writing 15 minutes at the top of an hour for, the whole day. And it's, it produces instead of like sitting there for 2 hours trying to birth 2,000 words out of yourself and just fighting yourself more than you write and being non-productive. The Mondo method is to write for 15 minutes at the top of the hour for, 8-10 hours a day. And you find that you'll easily surpass 2,000 words a day if you just do that, in 15 minutes. In 15 minutes, when I get going, I can easily write 500 words. Like, that's easy. Because I was doing, he mentioned, Pomodoro. I was using the Pomodoro technique, which is, how is it? It's 15-minute spurts with a 5-minute break in between, and you do 4 repetitions of that, and that's called 1 Pomodoro. After what you do 1 Pomodoro, you get like a half-hour break. And it was really fantastic. You had the little tick, tick, tick. I'd set my phone up. I got a little Pomodoro app. You have a little tick, tick, tick. Once you're writing, you lose that tick, tick, tick. The bell goes off. I got 5 minutes. I'll hop on Facebook. I'll check my emails, whatever it is. Quick 5 minutes, see what's going on. Social media becomes less of a distraction at that point because you're able to just quick check in. Your 5 minutes are up, bing, back to it, get into your writing. And I was spitting out 2,000 words like easy when I was dedicated to it. And, this is at a time I got kids, I got the family, I'm doing that thing, but I'm not working. So while the kids are at school, the wife is at work, I do have that alone time to do Pomodoros. That's not my case anymore because, like I said, that was like a 3 or 4 week window. So now I'm back to the full-time writing, and I find what I have is like an hour a day at best, either before I leave for work or after I get home, chug a cup of coffee one way or the other, and write for 15, 20, 30 minutes. And that's what I have now. And like right now I'm in the process of, like I told you, trying to get a book out. So I was furiously getting a second draft in shape for the editor. It's, and the editor's working with it now. And in the meantime, I'm working on all the acknowledgments, the table of contents, all the little stupid extras that go into the layout of the book. I have no time to sully forth and write those little extra things. So I envy you. But at the same time, I don't envy you because you were writing to pay the bills. Is that how it is?
Well, if that's the case, then there wouldn't be any bills getting paid. That's what I do. But let me be clear that while I do the Mondo method, I am nowhere at the level that Armand is. His Mondo method is literally 15 minutes and he cranks out 1,000 words. My Mondo method is an hour and I crank out 1,000 words and then I take a break and go waddle at the park or whatever. So, mine is a relaxed Mondo method because I am not at the level that he's at. But, in the case of the position you're in, I think what you're doing 1 hour of 1,000 words a day and doing that pace of, 50 days, 1,000 words each is much better than the feast and famine, that most writers go through. So, I don't think there's anything wrong with the pace that you're on. And I think you kind of have the best of both worlds because you can earn a paycheck and pay the bills and at the same time, publish your work, at a steady pace.
Yeah. But at the same time, I appreciate like yours and Armand's approach of like, if I don't write, there's the lights go off or, there's no food in the refrigerator. And I'm not at that level. There's a desperation in writing like that. And, what comes of that, I don't know, but I've never truly been there. You know what I'm saying? I dabbled in that for a brief period of time, but, what I found was the difference between the job I was doing before and the job I do now is my satisfaction with the job. And I was thoroughly, utterly unsatisfied, unchallenged, bored. I couldn't live with myself doing that job. That's why I walked off of it, But I think a lot of good raw shit came out in my writing as a result of that just disgust and depression I had being in that job. And like I said, like sneaking those moments in, just sitting there writing, and I was writing disgust. I was disgusted that I was able to have time writing on the job because they didn't have enough, shit to keep me going, and I was unchallenged. And a lot of good, just nasty human shit came out of that. And now I'm in a job where I'm very well compensated, I'm happy and well adjusted, and I have to put a lot into my job to maintain my job. I have to give a lot of myself to the job that I didn't have to give to that other job. So I'm desperate for places to write now, Like I said, I think it's fair to give myself an hour a day to writing, and that's very, very criminally little. And that's what I struggle with nowadays, whereas and I listen to you and Armand on the Mondo Method, and you're like in a completely reverse position, like you're writing, you're singing for your supper type of thing, and that's where you're coming from, and you're writing with a desperation, and there's a beautiful artistic romantic point of view to that, and there's like a scary, like I have to do this desperation type of thing to that, and the product of that is what it can become cheesy because you're just putting shit out. But you guys, like I've read both of you obviously, and you're in that desperation, you're coming out with that ugly desperate shit like I was talking about in my old job. You're coming out that ugly, but it's human good stuff that's coming out there. I think that's what's coming out. Am I not right? Am I wrong in that assertion?
No, you're exactly right. It's difficult. You're scared shitless every day, and you are, writing to save your life and your family's life literally, every day. I kind of put the blinders on and I just do it because it's become such a part of me now that the stories need to be told. And yes, I need the money and I want the money to pay the bills, and I don't need to be rich or famous or anything. But regardless of what happens, I mean, even if I get booted out of my house, I'm going to be writing this stuff in a cardboard box somewhere, because at this point it's in my veins. I can't let it go. And I guess on some levels it always was. And I kind of lived a lie, like you. I did well for 25 years in corporate America. I made a lot of money. Had various promotions. I was successful. I was an account executive and did all kinds of things. But I was living a lie. I was always around, the square peg in the round hole. And, I was always the guy that, had the facial hair in the financial industry, and they didn't like that. And I was the guy that said the inappropriate things, in the conference rooms during meetings and stuff. And I was the guy that spoke his mind, even if the boss said, we want to go in this direction. And I said, well, that may not be the direction to go in. And, I guess I've always kind of been the antichrist of whatever group I seem to be a part of. But now I'm living it. So it's renegade, but it's frightening. I don't sleep a lot. I spend a lot of times, just lying awake in my head, and part of it is trying to outpace the demons and the bill collectors, and then the other part of it is really working the characters and the stories that won't let me go. I'm a part of each story, and it's hard. I gotta listen to all the voices in my head, Mr. Frank.
You do. You need to. Chuck Buda, so, I'm looking at the time, and it's criminal when we have these fantastic interviews like this, but we're at that point where I got to start wrapping it up. So I think I proved to the world, the Zongers out there, that you have a Zonger credibility. You love the genre. You've converted over as a result of this podcast, and you've dabbled in writing it as being a learned writer yourself. And even though you work in the more horror realms, I do too, really, when it comes down to it. So we wrap it up with this. You and I have partnered up, and we're going to be doing a signing soon, right?
Oh, man, I can't wait. I can't wait. November 11th.
Yes.
7 p.m. to 9 p.m. at Demented Brewing Company in Middlesex, New Jersey. Mr. Frank of Bizzong and Chuck Buda of the Mondo Method are joining forces to sign books, meet the people, and drink lots of flights of beer, delicious beer, with all the people. Can't wait.
There you go. This is what it's all about when it comes down to it, is it not, Mr. Chuck Buda?
It really is.
It's just
screw the writing. I just want to drink beer with people.
I want to drink beer, and we'll talk about books like we do right here on our podcast. That's I love talking the craft. You know, when you and I we really first met down at Scares at Care in Virginia, we'll forever talk about this convention for the rest of our lives on our podcast. But it really was a magical time down there in Virginia this year, and you and I got to hang out for real in the first place. We're both from New Jersey, and we had to meet in New Jersey for the first time. But it was, we both knew Armand and all those people, but to meet you and really grasp what you're doing and understand and took hold of it. I'm like, this Chuck Buda guy is the real deal. I had to work with you. And Chuck Buda, you came to me after the Scares at Care, and you're like, we're gonna do a signing at Vintage Vinyl of all, like a record store. And I'm like, what's this guy talking about? We're gonna do a book signing at a record store, but you had convictions.
It's gonna happen.
Yeah, see, you have convictions. We're gonna do this. We're gonna make this happen. It doesn't matter where we sign books. We're just gonna grab the places by the balls, and we're gonna walk in there and we're gonna sign our books. And I tried to be a little more reasonable with you, and I thought. Our pal, we've mentioned him a million times, Armand Rizamilia, he did a book signing at a bookstore, a brewery, a microbrewery up here in New Jersey. And I said, well, why don't we take that idea? Why don't we find a brewery that'll host us? And you and I found a nice common ground in Demented Brewing, met up there, talked with the fine folks at Demented. And not only do they have incredibly fantastic beers, but the venue itself it's got this like dark demon hell setting that's just perfect for signing horror books in and talking about the craft and everything. And we're going to talk about the craft of writing, and we're going to talk about craft beers. It's going to be an amazing night on November 11th. And I implore anybody who is in New Jersey or who can get to Middlesex, New Jersey on the evening of November 11th to come join us. Have some beers, maybe grab a book. Chuck will sign a book. I'll sign a book. But we want you to have beers and hang out with us more than anything in the entire world, right?
Oh, it's going to be wild. I can't wait. I actually stay up many nights dreaming about our event there, so
yeah,
can't wait.
I cannot wait. It's coming up quick, and we're trying to put it all together. I mentioned I'm a naughty boy. I really shouldn't make any promises about a novella I'm going to have out for that signing, because I'm against the gun on getting it out. So I won't promise too much, but there might be a brand new Frank J. Edler, Mr. Frank book out for that signing.
Oh, I can't wait.
So that's the whole in total of Chuck Buda and why you're here on Bizzong. You just Chuck, tell them what you got out there and what they can look for in Chuck Buda land.
Well, right now you can find all my stuff exclusively on Amazon.com or via my website. But I have the Debt Collector trilogy, which is a dark psychological thriller, very near and dear to modern society and making our ends meet. I also have a Son of Earp series, which is a Western horror thriller series, and that's really cool. It's a mix of Westerns and horrors, and the characters are great. There's a mentally challenged young boy in there, so he's a really cool character. So I think people would like that. And I'm actually working on a couple of new series that are coming out shortly. So I have a zombie series, a zombie novella series. It'll be 10 novellas, and the first book should be coming out in the next month or so. And I'm working on a vampire series, but it doesn't contain vampires. So it's like the Seinfeld version of vampires. It's a vampire book about nothing.
There it is. See, Zongers, that's what I'm talking about. Beast mode. The guy's a monster. I got these series, that series. He just produces because he's out there. He's just grinding day in and day out, trying to make a career of this. And you got to love that, man. He's dedicated to his art. That's what I saw in the man. That's what Armand sees in the man. And, he's got the love for the Bizarro. And he's gonna be there eventually. Kevin Strange, give him some freaking feedback. Yo, that's what I'm talking about. And come out November 11th. Demented Brewing in Middlesex, New Jersey, in the heart of Central Jersey. If there's any way you can get out and see us that Friday night, please come out and see us. We would love to have you there. Show us what we got on the table for books and sign them up for you, but just come out and have a beer with us. Really, that's all we want. Right, Chuck?
Oh, yeah. And the beers are great. You should come, even if you hate us, come just for the beer.
Oh, totally just for the beer. I was just at a little microbrew place in Woodbridge, New Jersey. Chuck, it was like I was drinking water. I was almost embarrassed.
Really?
Yeah. Not good. So come to Demented November 11th. Once again, Zongers, Mr. Chuck Buda. Chuck, thanks for coming on Bizzong with us this week. We look forward for all the great things you have coming for us.
Thanks for having me, Mr. Frank. This is really a great honor to be with you on your show.
There it is, Zongers. Another one in the book with Mr. Chuck Buda. Hope we get to see some bizarro fiction from Chuck Buda one day. I love when everybody attempts to try to get into the spirit of things and produce their own brand of some bizarro stuff. But even if Chuck doesn't wholeheartedly embrace it in his writing, of course, he is a fan of the work, and that is what we love most. So give Chuck a hug. And check Chuck out, Check his horror out. We don't all just read Bizarro, right? We all read beyond Bizarro. So check out Chuck Buda. That Pay Up and Die. That book, you heard Chuck. He sounds like a nice guy, Chuck. Don't let that nice guy veneer fool you. You read Pay Up and Die. There's some unexpected shit going on in that book. Yeah. Different. Unexpected. That's how I would categorize Pay Up and Die by Chuck Buda. So check that out. Check out. He's got the Western stuff going on. And like you said, he's got some vampire-y stuff coming on. He's doing everything. He's trying it all. And kudos to him for just grinding it out. Zongers. Of course, Bizzong is, as always, available for your advertising needs. We'll advertise your product, your wares, or yourself at a number of great rates, starting at $50 a show. But you need to contact Jess, Jess, at projectiradio.com and get in touch with him. Tell him what you need, what your advertising needs and necessities are. You want a one-episode thing? You looking to do something a month? We got outstanding rates on full year advertising. There's always to structure it and all different price schemes that will work for you and your budget. So reach out to Jess. That costs $0, I assure you, to inquire about advertising here on Bizzong or the rest of the Project iRadio Network. And don't forget, Zongers, you need to be following us on Twitter at Bizzong Podcast or on Facebook, facebook.com/Bizzong. And that's where you're going to find out about all the updates, when the latest shows are out, and get them doodles. Check out the doodles. We're also on Instagram. Just search Bizzong. We're on Instagram there. The doodles are going up. Because Instagram is like a place to be. I learned this type of thing from the Mondo Method podcast right here on Project iRadio. Know what I'm talking about? If not, check out those podcasts. And because we've come to the end of the show, you're free to check out other great Project iRadio podcasts. Adieu.
Ladies and gentlemen, Project I Radio presents the Mondo Method.
Where an old man with a goatee teaches a younger guy with a beard how to write.
Starring the mentor, Mondo Guerrero. And from parts unknown, up-and-coming superstar, the Great Buda.
Okay, so their names are really Armand, Rosamilia, and Chuck Buda. And old man Armand is going to teach Chuck how to write a book. And maybe you too, while they're at it.
Featuring marketing morsels by Aaron Sweet El Mahari. Exclusively on Project I Radio.
Buttercup of Doom on Project I Radio. I am your host, Kelly Owen. I'm just a girl who writes horror and thriller fiction, talks to bugs, jumps in puddles, and now hosts a weekly podcast full of opinions, advice, and a touch of gypsy wisdom, whether it's current affairs or social media nightmares. Join me, the Buttercup of Doom, Mondays on Project I Radio.